In the sweltering heat of a Georgia summer, a lone auction block stood drenched in sweat, blood, and fear. The crowd whispered, eyes averted, as a single girl was brought forward, a girl no one wanted. Her skin was marred with old scars, her eyes hollow wells of unspeakable knowledge. When a plantation owner claimed her for himself, he did not know that he was not buying a slave. He was buying a curse. A secret so vile, it had been buried under centuries of sun, soil, and silence. Tonight, we uncover the truth that history tried to erase. Tonight, you will see the darkness they never dared to speak. It was 1842 in the swamplands of rural Georgia. Spanish moss draped over skeletal trees, and the air carried the scent of rot and decay. Small towns clung desperately to the edges of plantations, where the wealthy lords of land and labor ruled with iron fists. In the shadows of these sprawling estates, whispers of unusual happenings drifted like fog over the fields. The Merrick plantation had always been peculiar. Locals avoided it after sundown, speaking of cries that pierced the night, of animals behaving strangely, and of servants vanishing without trace. On a July morning, a slave auction drew the wealthiest men of the county to the town square. Among the offerings stood a young woman, the last of her family, sold into bondage. There was something in her presence that made men hesitate, a subtle repulsion that none could name. The plantation owner, James Merrick, purchased her without hesitation, dismissing the unease as superstition. But the land had memories, and those memories were hungry. By the time she reached the plantation, rumors had already spread. They said her family had been taken by the swamp spirits, left to rot in the shadows of forgotten trees. Some whispered that she had survived unspeakable rites and returned, not as herself, but as something else. Servants spoke of seeing shadows move against the natural flow of sunlight, of hearing her name whispered on the wind at midnight. The children of the neighboring plantations avoided her, sensing a presence that chilled the bone. James Merrick scoffed at these tales, yet even he felt it, an unease that settled in his chest, a coldness that did not belong to the summer air. As the days passed, strange events escalated. Tools disappeared from the shed, only to reappear covered in soil, even though no one had been near. Horses screamed without reason, their eyes wide and frantic. One night, Merrick awoke to a sound like fingernails scraping along the walls of his bedchamber, but when he lit a candle, there was no one there. The girl herself spoke little, yet her silence spoke volumes. She watched the plantation with a patient, unblinking gaze, as if counting the sins of every living soul. The plantation's ledger revealed chilling secrets. Previous owners had died under mysterious circumstances. Locals had avoided Merrick, yet whispers of midnight gatherings and offerings to unknown entities persisted. The girl's scars hinted at practices older than the plantation itself. Symbols carved into her skin, hidden under layers of soot and dirt, signs of rituals long condemned. And while no one could name what she was, everyone knew something inhuman lingered in her gaze. Visitors to the plantation began to disappear. A traveling preacher vanished after midnight prayers, leaving only a faint smell of sulfur. Servants reported waking in the dark, surrounded by dozens of tiny footprints, cold and bare, leading nowhere. And through it all, the girl remained motionless, her eyes following unseen forces, her lips occasionally moving in a language no one recognized. The land itself seemed alive, whispering secrets that pricked at the edges of sanity. County officials ignored reports. Sheriff and judges dismissed complaints, citing tradition and fear of disturbing the powerful Merrick family. Plantation owners across the state whispered of secret societies, gatherings where wealth, land, and forbidden knowledge intertwined. Some swore that the girl had been a product of these societies, bred not merely for labor, but for dark purposes, a living vessel for their rituals and sins. The deeper Merrick delved into her possession, the more power H. A local doctor, curious of the girl's unusual scars and calm demeanor, attempted an examination. He found strange markings beneath the skin, symbols that resembled both African and European occult traditions. The doctor himself fell ill, muttering in his sleep of voices beneath the soil before vanishing entirely. Merrick's other associates, men of influence, men of church, kept their distance, fearful yet covetous. Something about the girl commanded respect, even from the powerful. At night, Merrick discovered hidden rooms beneath the plantation, sealed for decades. In these underground chambers lay artifacts of old, skulls etched with runes, jars of unidentifiable substances, books bound in tattered leather, written in blood. The girl would sometimes stand before them, humming softly, a sound that made the air heavy and oppressive. The local clergy, when consulted, refused to enter the estate, muttering prayers and warnings. The plantation was a nexus, a focal point where past and present horrors converged. Merrick tried to control the girl, using threats, gifts, and violence. None worked. Instead, he felt his own mind unraveling. Dreams invaded him with grotesque visions of the past. Children chained, fires consuming flesh, shadowed figures whispering commands. He began to suspect the girl was more than human, that she could peer into the darkest corners of his psyche. Sleep became impossible. The plantation became a prison of endless dread. Servants began dying under mysterious circumstances. One was found hanging in the stable, eyes wide, mouth twisted in silent scream. Another disappeared entirely, leaving only a pool of blackened water where she had last stood. Merrick, terrified, yet fascinated, realized that the girl was always near, her gaze tracking every soul to their final moments. Locals stopped visiting entirely, leaving the plantation isolated, a kingdom ruled by shadows, superstition, and fear. Whispers suggested the girl was tied to entities older than America itself. Her scars and rituals resembled those used in cults long vanished, invoking powers from beyond the veil. Merrick consulted texts he found in the underground chambers, discovering incantations, prayers to deities of suffering, and instructions for controlling human minds. Each page made his heart pound with a mix of awe and terror. He realized he was not merely a landowner, but a participant in something cosmic, something profoundly evil. Churches refused to bless the land. Priests who attempted exorcisms fell ill, their sermons dissolving into incoherent screams. Some believed the girl was a vessel of divine punishment. Others claimed she was the spawn of unholy rituals blending Christian and pagan practices. Merrick, desperate for answers, began to replicate these rites, only to awaken each night to louder whispers and shadows that moved against logic, as if the very air condemned him. The girl's presence instilled paralysis in all who saw her. Animals trembled, children cried, and men who prided themselves on courage cowered. Merrick discovered that her influence extended beyond the physical. She could manipulate thoughts, twist reality, and awaken memories too horrible to face. He realized that fear itself was her weapon, an invisible hand that could crush the strongest mind. Merrick's neighbors abandoned him. Roads to the plantation became impassable, as if the swamp itself conspired against trespassers. Mail went undelivered. Visitors vanished without trace. The estate existed outside the world, a liminal space where past horrors and present madness merged. The girl walked freely through fields of decay, her presence shaping every shadow, every sound. Merrick began to doubt his own existence. In one hidden chamber, Merrick found a diary from a long-dead owner, recounting the girl's ancestors and a pact made with a shadowed entity for immortality and power. The girl was the final key, a living relic designed to enact the pact. Each generation before her had suffered, and each generation after would be trapped. The diary ended abruptly. Do not awaken her, or all will end in fire and silence. Merrick read, and yet he could not stop. One stormy night, the girl vanished. Windows shattered without wind. Fires erupted without cause, and shadows danced across the walls, coalescing into human shapes. Merrick, frantic, searched and found her in the underground chamber, surrounded by candles and the skeletal remains of those who had opposed her. She smiled, not a smile of innocence, but one of hunger and understanding. The girl's lineage was revealed, descendants of a cult that had infiltrated plantations for centuries, performing rituals under the guise of slavery and land acquisition. She carried within her a consciousness older than any living memory, a repository of cruelty, manipulation, and dark magic. Her eyes reflected not just death, but understanding, a knowledge that humans were instruments of her will. Merrick, driven to madness, begged for mercy. But mercy had no place here. The girl's influence infiltrated his mind, replaying every sin, every cruelty, every hidden desire. He saw himself through her eyes, and in that reflection, he found not man, but monster. Shadows claimed him, and by morning, the plantation was silent, save for the gentle humming of a girl walking among graves and ruins. The plantation was not merely a site of labor. It was a living entity, shaped by centuries of blood, fear, and ritual. The girl was its heart, its memory, its vengeance. Locals who had vanished were now part of its foundation, their souls feeding the soil, maintaining its hunger. Merrick's name faded, but the girl remained, eternal, waiting for the next generation, the next fool who thought they could own what was never meant to be owned. Today, the Merrick plantation stands abandoned, hidden under decades of moss, soil, and shadow. Travelers speak of figures in the windows, of whispers that call your name, of a girl who watches from the darkness. No records explain what happened, and no historian dares speak of it. The question remains, what awakens when we claim what was never ours to claim? And in the silence, if you listen closely, you can almost hear her humming.